Kansas City Jazz took many elements of the blues and other kinds of approaches to music and sort of fused them into something which was quite different from what one heard at that same period in New Orleans or in Chicago. It recognized the individuality of people who lived in this part of the Midwest. It recognized the kinds of appeal that certain kinds of blues-oriented music had for the people in this area. And so what it did, Kansas City Jazz in the early days took the ragtime elements that were at that period closely associated with New Orleans and Chicago, and put them in a more bluesy perspective. I mean, you heard a more direct relationship between the traditional Mississippi and Texas blues than you did in either the New Orleans or the Chicago or the New York types of jazz that were being played in those days. The big bands were traveling quite a bit. There were many territory bands, and so the elements of swing that were a vital part of the music of Fletcher Henderson and Don Redman and other great bands, and Chick Webb, great bands of the 30s, were refocused in a way that was unique to this area, so that Count Basie, well, before Count Basie, Benny Moten, and the bands that Benny Moten that were around at that time, not that some as well known, some not so well known, but they all had that blues quality as well as the feeling of swing. Count Basie, for instance, combined in his piano playing many aspects of the Earl Hines octave trumpet style of playing. He was obviously, by his own admission, influenced by Fats Waller with that kind of stride, ragtime playing. And of course, he said in an interview that I did with him here that this was the first place, Kansas City was the first place he ever really heard the blues, even though he had played with great blues singers like Bessie Smith and people like that. This is where he heard the kind of blues that made his piano playing and his bands a unique contribution to the history and development of jazz. Well, it had a great effect on the music. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons Kansas City had a different effect from Chicago is because there were more places later in the history of the music to dance in. I mean, there were dance halls, there were places where people went socially to dance. Even some of the nightclubs in those days were larger and provided a place for people to dance. When clubs, as you went east, were getting smaller and smaller, and people were concentrating more on listening than participating in as dancers. So dance had a great deal to do with the rhythmic feeling of the music that was created in this area. And certainly a great musician that became famous here, Mary Lou Williams, epitomized, as well as Charlie Parker, the ability to go all the way from boogie woogie to bebop and beyond, and to stay important enough in her own development to be able to play a concert with Cecil Taylor, and to be able to react and interact with contemporary musicians from many other points of view. Jazz is a way of playing. It's a repertory of pieces, songs that embody that way of playing, that codify that way of playing, that demonstrate the way the improvising creative artists have utilized the language and have structured the music. So that's inherent in the repertory. And when you take the great artists like Duke Ellington or John Coltrane or any of the innovators, Charlie Parker, you'll find the things that were their innovations embodied in the songs that they created, or in the songs that were created by the groups that they performed with. So jazz is a way of playing, it's a repertory, and it's also America's classical music.